The boss of the agency set up to ensure Māori get the same chance of surviving cancer as Pākēhā doesn't know if that's achievable within the 10-year timeframe the government set. Māori are 20% more likely to get cancer and nearly twice as likely to die from it than non-Māori. And one of the main goals of the new agency is to achieve equity in cancer care and outcomes. It will be based within the Ministry of Health, despite various interest groups lobbying for a standalone agency. But the agency head will report directly to the Health Minister. Otago University public health physician and cancer epidemiologist Professor Diana Sarfati is the interim director of the agency. I asked her whether Māori will be prioritised in order to achieve equity.
There might be some instances where there are some programs which are particularly pro-equity. So if you were looking at two programs, for example, that were both highly beneficial, but one was very strongly pro-equity, that one would be prioritised. So an example might be, for example, and this is not, there is absolutely no decisions made about this at all, but as an example, we know that Māori have much higher rates of stomach cancer, and that's due to higher prevalence of H. pylori infection, which is an infection that children tend to get. So there may be a place for screening for H. pylori in some populations and treating that to reduce future risk of stomach cancer. So that would be a very pro-equity intervention.
So prioritising Māori for screening in certain instances?
Well, in that instance, it may be that it would be only cost effective for Māori and Pacific children, for example, because the prevalence of H. pylori infection is so much higher in those populations.
I suppose what I'm asking in a way is that those people who seem to have better outcomes and greater access, say urban, wealthier Pākēhā, for example, can they expect outcomes for them to plateau or drop off in a public health system as we readjust to a more equitable system?
Do you know what? My view on that is if we focus on equity, if we look at all elements of the system and have a very pro-equity approach, what that really means that we're doing is we're identifying gaps in the system and we're filling them. We're making the system better. It'll become pro-equity, but it's likely to become better for everybody. So my expectation would be the system will improve for everybody and we will be closing gaps. So it's an and.
The thing is, though, obviously you can only spend $1 once, and if you look at some of the statistics, they're pretty scary. By 2040, predicted, 52,000 people diagnosed with cancer, 144 a day, almost twice what it is at the moment.
Yeah,
at a certain point, you run out of money, don't you? Or you just have a certain pool of money and you have to ration it.
And this is exactly why you need a really clear leadership and a structured approach and a planned approach to cancer. That's one of the key things that we're facing. We've got population growth and population ageing, so there's doubling of cancer in the next 20 years. So we need to be very deliberate in how we invest in cancer. Prevention is key. Obviously, it's better to stop people getting cancer. Nobody wants to be diagnosed with cancer, so that's a really key element. But also being very thoughtful about how we invest and where we invest so that we are getting the best bang for our buck.
So how much of that spending do you think is going to be redistribution, reprioritising, and the word used in this document was reallocation rather than new resource?
None of those decisions have been made, so that's going to be the work in the next 6 months, and looking at, as this agency takes shape and looking at the resource requirements, and then we will be looking for new resources coming into cancer. So we're not looking at taking resources away from people currently. We're trying to add to the system and also make sure that we're spending money on the things that really matter.
But some money will be shifted away from areas into other priorities, won't it? Because that's the terminology used in this report released, reallocation. Well,
we're looking at making sure our systems and our services work as well as they possibly can. So, for example, it may be that it makes more sense to develop some specialised services for some cancers within New Zealand because you get better outcomes when you concentrate that specialist expertise in one place. But if we do that, we'd also want to make sure we've got services to allow people to get to that that one place. So that may be a reallocation of resources in order to get better outcomes. So that might be an example. So again, it's not meaning that people are going to do worse in some areas. It's thinking about what we do and making sure we get the best possible outcomes for people, given that there's always going to be limited resources. I mean, that's always true in health. It's not an infinite pot of money. So thinking really carefully about what we do and aiming for the best possible outcomes for people with cancer in New Zealand.
So the timeframe to deliver equity for Māori in terms of survival equity is 10 years thereabouts. How realistic is that?
2030. Well, we're going to be working very hard at doing that. So we're going to be putting these sort of policies and procedures in place. So we're going to be working with Māori to identify what is going to work best for them. It's an ambitious goal, but we will be working, towards that. That's what we're working towards.
That word is used a lot, ambitious and aspirational. So is it realistic in your mind, that goal? How confident are you it can be achieved?
I think I think there's going to be an element of looking at cancer by cancer, because of course cancers are actually a whole lot of different diseases, and actually there are slightly different mechanisms at play for different cancers. So I think in some cases we will be able to meet that aim, and in others it may take a little bit longer. But
which areas do you think might be a bit tougher to crack? Which cancers?
Well, I think probably where there is more complex treatments, perhaps. But I'm thinking here, when we look at survival outcomes for the cancers where we have well-developed screening programs, so cervical and breast cancer screening, where we've got very clear processes and procedures and quality assurance processes in place, what we've found is that the women who are diagnosed through those screening programs, the survival inequities disappear, so that we know we can do it. But it does take a lot of effort, and it does take a lot of focus and being very clear and having quality indicators and measuring those and holding systems to account.
Right, so you're saying
that's what we're going to be doing.
You're saying that there are some areas that you think that is achievable in terms of the equity for Māori, some cancers, but other cancers might be a tougher ask to get to that goal within 10 years.
Yeah, and that's I mean, and I don't want to talk about specific cancers because that's going to be part of the work that we're going to have to do. But again, I mean, another example is children's cancers. There's no evidence, or very little evidence, of inequalities in outcomes for children's cancers. And again, they've developed a really good system, which again is very tightly monitored, and they have a lot of processes and procedures in place, which stops gaps opening up. And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve here.
So the board of this agency is going to finalise the cancer plan, and will oversee the Cancer Control Agency. So you will be on that board, as will be the boss of the Ministry of Health. How many other positions are there going to be on the board?
That has yet to be determined. So that's going to be, so the board will be appointed. That hasn't happened yet. And so the next 6 months is about setting up those structures. So getting the board and then start moving towards, shaping the agency itself.
What percentage of Māori representation will there be on the board, do you know?
I don't know. As I say, that has yet to be determined. So that's the work to be done now. But it's very important, clearly.
Will there be patients, people who have lived experience of cancer?
My expectation would be that there will, and also that we, my expectation is that I will be working in partnership with Māori as well at a leadership level. So can you guarantee
that there'll be ring-fenced positions on the board for patients and for Māori?
I can't guarantee anything at the moment because that work is yet to be done.
Who gets the final say in that?
Well, that will be the Director General of Health.
Right, even though you're kind of you're spearheading this project, that's not a decision that you will get to have the final call on.
We'll be definitely consulting on that. He'll be definitely consulting with me on that. In some respects, that's because this is an interim role while we set up the final governance structure. So I'm stepping in to provide that support and leadership and set up that structure. But so that ultimately, once we get to the full agency, we'll have the CEO kind of role, and then the CEO will be looking after the board.
And that's Professor Diana Sarfati there.